So it doesn't look because mine says we're already on gallery.
Okay, man doesn't. So which one of those did you select to see gallery?
So click on more again, the three dots.
Okay.
Gallery at top. With my gallery at top, I see you, I see Councilman Ford, but then I see 5 other people, but their screens aren't active. So I think that in order to see, I can see Frank now.
I only see 3 people. That's you, Frank, and Ford.
Right now.
Okay.
Jones, this is Cheyenne. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Cheyenne. It's Patrice.
Okay, got one.
We can see you now.
Okay, great. How can you see me from your camera?
I got it displayed on here.
Okay. I don't see it up there.
You the only person there, Cheyenne?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, why you just stay at home and go online like the rest of us?
I don't know. It's something about the word dedication.
We dedicated. We here.
Cheyenne for president.
Hello, is this Frank?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
You know gas too high to drive.
I'm trying to get. Yeah, we're trying to get Martavius on before we begin. Being it is his committee.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah, my earpieces are messing up. I can hear anything.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, it is May 12th at approximately 3:35, and I call to order the fiscal year 2023 budget hearing committee. I need a roll call, please.
Councilman Jones.
Present.
Councilwoman Robinson.
Present.
Councilman Ford.
Present.
Councilman Covette.
Here.
Councilwoman Easter Thomas.
Present.
Okay. Chair Johnson.
Present. Did we miss anyone? Okay, thank you. First up is the City of Memphis Public Works Division with their operating budget. Will you please identify yourself, state what division you work for and what you do there?
Yes, ma'am. Robert Connect, Public Works Director. So, Councilwoman, we're going through 3 budgets with Council today, the General Fund, Sewer Fund, and Stormwater Fund, each one having its own basic operating budget request. So we're going to start off with the General Fund. Public Works General Fund is broken up into 2 main areas, administration, but then they have street maintenance and neighborhood improvements. Street maintenance includes street, which is our paving operations, and then our right-of-way group. And then under neighborhood improvements, you have code enforcement, environmental enforcement, ground services, and City Beautiful. The main important changes that are inclusive of this FY23 operating budget request are, as I mentioned before, the creation, and the mayor alluded to, the creation of a new illegal dumping operation under Public Works, Neighborhood Improvement, and Environmental Enforcement by adding 17 positions, including the management and support staff for that new illegal dumping operation. This will consolidate all illegal dumping operations into one single area of Public Works. It will therefore alleviate solid waste, who had been in part providing support and assistance so they can focus on their core services. We have also received increased funding for demolitions. That is always a consistent request, is for more funding to kind of address blight. So demolitions being one of our main ways to negate blighted conditions by removing the structure that is in a dilapidated state. And then we also have a plan within partnership with Solid Waste, establishing community drop-off locations. It's kind of a fall in the dumpster days rationale. Going to slide 5, our expenditure bridge from 22 to 23. You'll see that our budget has not changed dramatically from fiscal year 22 to 23. There have been changes in personnel reflective of our ISL and increase in salaries. Materials and supplies has been a slight increase, primarily due to escalating costs, including fuel and materials and supplies. But overall, our budget is relatively neutral from FY22 to proposed FY23. If you look at our slide 7, our program comparative spending, again, this is broken down by the 3 main funded areas of Public Works General Fund, Administration, Street Maintenance, and Neighborhood Improvement. You will see that there's not, again, significant changes in the budget for each one of those operations. The only major change, which I will explain where the funding came from, that is in the neighborhood improvement with the ISLs. Slide 8, discussion of our year-over-year changes in expenditures. Again, so the review that we have a net increase in salaries for both, again, for salary adjustments and for the 17 ISLs. There's been some changes in insurance and pension cost. We did increase the budget $1 million for demolitions. M&S, our materials and supplies, went up. Thank you, sir. M&S went up by $415,000. Again, material cost increases, and those are in adding a new service center or increasing the service center is a majority of that cost escalations. And then the changes reflected in city shop and fuel charges, city shop charges being the bigger factor. And then insurance claims and lawsuits, there was a decrease overall. And then we saw a net increase in state street aid to the Division of Public Works. So the net change was $13,651. In terms of revenue discussions, you'll see that there's the main changes that you'll see from 22 to 23 are the net transfers in. There was a significant reallocation of funding to the division in support of the legal dumping operation from the sales tax referendum fund for illegal dumping operations. And that's the major change represented in this slide. Next slide, an overview of discussion year-over-year changes in revenues. These are sources of revenues outside of our normal paths. We have an agreement with Peachtree Recovery Services. They go out and find, they go to insurance companies who have, based on police records, and they go after the damages that they cause to city's infrastructure. So they damage a guardrail, they damage anything that's city-owned assets, then they help us recover those costs. They're very successful in helping recoup those costs through going after the insurance companies. They don't go after owners; they go after insurance companies who then pay those claims. Our anti-neglect enforcement program, we've been reevaluating that program, part of our code enforcement fee program. So that program is in its being revisited. So we've reduced that until such time we feel more comfortable with where that program is going. And then, as I mentioned, with operating transfers in for the sales tax referendum in 2019, that $1.4 million of additional revenue provided to Public Works for the illegal dumping operation. And then the division authorized complement is changing, reflective of those 17 positions. The increased ISL is shown here. And you also see that we currently have 24 vacancies. Our major M&S on slide 16 is a breakdown of our biggest items by dollar amount in the general fund M&S. The biggest one is our asphalt products. That's the majority. That's where all of our paving happens. From street maintenance, miscellaneous professional services is second at a little over $4 million. There's another slide that breaks down that further. Demolitions, as we've mentioned before, is one of our other big expenditures at $2.1 million. And then M&S, which is general materials and supplies, city shop charges, city shop fuel, utilities, claims, weed and chemical control, lawsuits, outside equipment repair, and small other accounts to reach the total of $15 million $15.5 million roughly. And then we have $5 million in expense recovery. The paving operations recoups its operational expenditures from the capital budget through an expense recovery from the CIP budget for street maintenance to perform paving. There's also a personnel expense recovery to accompany that. As I mentioned, the more detailed analysis of professional services accounts. You can see that under those professional services, our biggest expenditure is grass mitigation. We have about 50 vendors we utilize to cut grass throughout the city as part of our overgrowth mitigation strategies. So that's about $1,685,650. We have a vendor. We're getting ready to do a pavement condition assessment, where we're going to go out and do a detailed analysis of all of our city streets and what the condition is, so that we can then institute a more strategic plan of managing our pavement with a part of our resurfacing program. We have an agreement with the Hospitality Hub, our homeless initiative for Public Works, where they are in partnership with us for cleaning up public right-of-ways. It's a really great partnership opportunity. And then as part of the ISL, there's going to be some disposal cost that'll be associated with that, where once we clean up these dump sites, we have to pay for the cost of disposal. And that's $425,000, a new estimated cost. And then there's some other various costs in the tune of $952,831. The next slide is 18, account leases. There are none in general fund for Public Works. The slide 19 is our MWB utilization. Now, there's a lot of information on this slide, and the key takeaway is that you'll see that from the OBDC office, you'll see a 14.8% with their total certified and non-certified MWB spend. But, however, if you look at the bottom, you'll see that our real number is 24.5%, and that is because we have spend associated with two of our other programs, including our SARP 10 program and our MSQ2, our Stormwater program, with Black and Veatch and All World, that does provide a significant increase in our MWB spend. And you'll see on the slide, a little section to the right, that broken out, how we've, you're adding an additional $16.3 million in spend that's not captured through OBDC. So we want to make sure that's clearly indicative of our commitment and our work to support local minority and women-owned businesses. And that's it for the general fund slides.
We have several council people waiting in the queue with questions. Before I begin allowing them to speak, let's recognize Councilman Canali for joining us, and Councilman Worth Morgan as well. Thank you. Okay, and Councilman Jones. Okay, the first person up is, okay, nobody. Okay, Councilman Jones, you're the only person, she says, is in the queue.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Ms. Connect, my first question is, how many demolitions would be covered by approximately $1 million?
It varies tremendously depending if we're doing more commercial or large apartment complexes, whereas those would be much more costly to the city of Memphis. So it's going to vary significantly year over year. We kind of mix it up so that we do a certain number of residential properties every year, and then depending how much funding we have available, we will then work on apartment complexes, and then we are working on a strategy to increase our commercial property demolitions as well.
Okay, well, but blight is an issue that's been identified by the administration, by the council, as an area that we want to improve upon. And I know that there's, each budget manager, each division head came in basically trying to keep the budget flat. So my question is, I would think that you have to have some idea in mind of what we can do with $1 million. But if that's not enough, we need to know that.
Yeah, it increased by 1 million over the previous year. Yes, sir. I mean, previously, if you look at and I'll have to go back, let me look at the 5-year report. We have, historically had more projects, more demolitions that we could perform than we had funding for. So I think we're increasing the funding for demolitions to a previous level of funding so that to support, commercial demolitions. Like I mentioned before, we've never really had an allocation of funding for commercial demolitions. So this funding is going to help kind of ensure we do have funding for commercial demolitions. We have hundreds of properties that we would like to kind of focus resources on from a commercial, like I said, a commercial demolition perspective. And then there have been a couple apartment complexes that have been on the horizon for us that we've been working towards to demolish. Apartment complexes can cost us, $500,000, $250,000 just to do, depending on the size of it.
Okay, so I get that. And so with that being the case, $1 million will only cover 4 if it's $250,000, and that's not scratching the surface as far as of making the improvements that we need. I'm just trying to get a better idea of whether it's residential versus commercial. $1 million might not be enough, and I may have mentioned to somebody yesterday. I know that you all, the administration didn't want you to come in with a budget increase, but the council has said that we want to tackle this issue, and if $1 million isn't enough to do that, we need to know that, Mr. Connett.
Well, I believe $1 million is a pretty significant increase in the budget. So, it would be a good opportunity to kind of see how much improvements we make in our demolition program. As I said before, since we've never really had funding for commercial property demolitions, and then see how much progress we make, and then if we make good progress, we reevaluate the program as part of our next fiscal year request.
Okay, so in previous years when we've just focused on residential, was there an allocation for that?
It was just a general allocation. We've primarily, in the past, almost all of the funding went to residential demolitions.
Okay, but approximately how much, Mr. Connett?
It was $1.2 million.
Okay, so $1.2 million for residential. That we demoed how many different parcels, if you would, of property?
I want to say it's about $3,000 to $4,000 of property. So I'd have to double check and see. It used to be.
That gives me a good idea. I didn't have that to begin with. So what you're saying is that so if I take 4,000, if I just take 4,000 at $1 million, that's approximately 2,500 or 20. I might have my zeros mixed up, but that's giving me an idea. But if we're throwing commercial into the mix, won't that result in a reduced amount of residential demolition that we are doing? If we're going from 1.2 to 1, and we're throwing commercial demolitions in there, and they typically are more expensive.
Well, I mean, some of the commercial properties are not, significant in size. We're talking small, 4,000, 5,000 square foot commercial spaces. The bigger ones are always apartment complexes. Those are always the most complicated and most costly ones when you do a large scale apartment complexes. So, I would foresee that you could have a good improvement in the number of demolitions that we're going to perform, just over because $1 million increase I think would help achieve a large number of improvements in our demolitions.
But you said $1 million increase. Are we going from 1.2 to 2.2?
Yes.
Okay. So when I saw the $1 million figure, was that was indicated as an increase?
That was the bridge, yes. So that was the additional 1 million on top of the 1.2. So now we're at
Oh,
2,
okay,
2.2.
okay. I'm sorry. Oh, okay, so I wasn't clear on that. Okay, well, thank you. Okay, that helps.
Yes, sir.
As far as, so my next question is, what's the plan regarding the 24 vacancies? How are we addressing that?
Well, our biggest focus has been on wages, where we struggle the greatest. We targeted some of our specific increases in areas that we've struggled the greatest. So with this part of our negotiations and reevaluation of position pay, that was our main strategy. Is that we just have not been able to be competitive with the private market. So we really kind of honed in on those positions that we feel like we could get the greatest return, greatest benefit by increasing the wages to be more competitive.
Okay, and that's included in this budget?
Yes.
Okay, and then my next question, you may not have this information, but I'm intrigued by this Peachtree Recovery Service. Do you know if MLG&W engages them too?
No.
Okay.
They
Because
have their own recoveries.
Oh, they do? Okay, great. Those are my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Now, Councilman Canales.
Okay. Thank you, Director. For the grass mitigation, you have a ballpark of about how many properties that is?
9,500.
Well,
Yeah, we cut them about 2 to 3 times a year. That's ballpark.
do we recuperate any of that money?
Yeah, if you look in our budget, there is a recovery cost, and it has been, that is an area that's gone up. We only recover about 25% of what we spend on our grass mitigation.
Is the 1,685,650, is that an adequate budget to cover 9,500 properties?
Well, I mean, this is private property we're cutting, and we try to keep it within the code, so there's not a code violation. It's it's a challenging opportunity for the city of Memphis.
What would be especially with the way that labor costs are now, what do you think is a fair amount?
We have utilized local contractors 100% for this opportunity. We have a few in-house crews. We did increase their budget last year, the payments, because of the costs were escalating. So I think we're in a good position to kind of see how the program goes for this year, and hopefully if there's an additional need, we can always come back and ask for additional funding.
Okay. Chief Ford, how much is left in the demolition budget for 2022?
Good afternoon, Councilman. Currently, as of the end of April, in the demolition budget, we have expended against that budget of $1.2 million, $812,631.
So depending upon Director's budget for May and June, Councilman Jones, I agree with you, and I think that developers and investors would much rather see blank property than dilapidated, falling in buildings. Chief, we can encumber that, right? Whatever's not spent to add on to that demo budget?
We have a carry forward request, so we do plan to carry forward that funding as part of from fiscal year 22 to 23.
Okay. And one more question. Out of the miscellaneous professional services line, the 952,831, could you just give us an idea of what types expenditures that is?
And I'm sorry, which one, sir?
The various vendors. I'm guessing those are all smaller contracts.
Oh yeah, they generally are like less than $100,000 each.
Okay. That's it for me, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you. No one else is in the queue? Well, it's my time. I have some questions. My first question is, please, now maybe you can't not do it today. I'd like to know in details exactly what is this new department's going to do in regards to eliminating blight and cleaning the city up. When I think about cleaning the city up, I'm talking about the streets, the sewages, the drainage. I'm talking about trash on private property. How are we going to clean it up? And I'm just wanting to make sure we have enough manpower as well as funding in order to address it. So I haven't heard a report on what those 17 people with that department will actually be responsible for. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So legal dumping is the focus of this group, which is being a huge challenge where you're talking sites where there's a lot of debris that has to be picked up. It's not littering in the traditional sense where it's a little bit of litter along the roadway. We're talking large areas where, significant amount of debris, truckloads of debris have been illegally disposed of. So you're looking at people who are running grapple trucks and heavy equipment. And then the trucks that support that, various bob trucks or dump trucks that are necessary to haul the debris to the landfill. And then you're going to need a supervisor and a foreman and a manager to kind of oversee that program. So the support of that is basically and a few support staff who help with the billing, managing 311 service requests, and keeping up the information because we will be working on the prosecution side of that. We have to share that information with the environmental enforcement who does the tracking and gathering the data so that we can prosecute. Okay, what about the street? So street sweeping or street cleaning falls under right of way during streets. We're going to talk about street sweeping here a little bit. That falls under the Stormwater Fund. In terms of street cleaning, is that where you're? What happens is apparently all the time. Build up. The rest of the group saying, I don't know if we've placed enough money in order to clean the city up. I think our major objective this year is we are going to have to clean this city up by any means and every means possible. So what I'm hearing from you, you're only attacking one aspect of it, but it's a lot of other aspects. For instance, code enforcement. We probably need personnel going out there talking to the general public and private individuals saying, you have to clean it up, and if you don't, we're going to issue citations. But when we say we want the city cleaned up, it's more than just the dumping. Dumping is major, but we have a lot of other issues to make this city look horrible. So what else can we do to make it happen? Where can these funds come from? But we need a good plan to clean the city up, and it's just not working with what we have so far.
Robert,
when I go to the Stormwater Fund, I'll have a discussion about what drain maintenance does. Drain maintenance goes out and cleans all the storm drains. And then we'll talk a lot about street sweeping because we have a renewed focus on street sweeping coming up. And that's obviously really critical to what you're talking about, cleaning up all the curb and gutters throughout the city, cleaning up the city streets. Okay.
Let me ask you another question. We talk about demolition of properties. And these could be private-owned properties that you would demo?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I think we need to try to come up with some type of obligation that these property owners have to give back to the city if we're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, we always place a lien on every property. Okay. By law, we have to place a lien on the property for all the work that we do on private property. Okay, then in that case, how often do you collect that money? It's very rare that we collect it all. Many times the property will end up being a tax foreclosure, and then, that means that it just becomes out of the market and goes into the land bank, and if the city was to be able to reclaim that property and go through another process. But it's very rare. The real benefit is the removal of the blighted condition. If it is a derelict structure that's unsafe, then we have to deal with the public safety hazard and make sure that it's no longer a risk to the general public.
Okay, why is it we can only charge 25% of the cost to cut grass or clean up? Is that,
Oh, no, we only recover about 25% of what we spend every year. When we bill, we place liens. Every time we cut a property, we place a lien on it. We're only receiving about 25 cents on the dollar for everything we spend. Yeah, we're only collecting. Yeah, we're only collecting about.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
all right then.
No, we bill 100%, but that's just been it's gone up. It's been increasing slightly.
Okay. Let me see, did I have anybody else?
Councilwoman.
Councilman Canali? Chief, okay.
Chief McGowan, Doug McGowan, Chief Operating Officer of Memphis, 791 North Graham. So, Chairwoman, I just wanted to add, I really appreciate your comments about cleaning up the city. We share that, but I do want to just reflect on what this council's done just in the last 2 years. You have allowed Director Connect to double the number of code enforcement inspectors through a previous budget increase, so now he has twice as many code folks doing that work. You've established and funded a Memphis Public Service Corps that's authorized to have up to 100 people, but the good news is we have about 25 or 30 on a routine basis. They continue to do the work and get hired by other divisions of government, so it's hard to keep good workers, but they are picking up litter, illegal dump sites. You've obviously just increased the demolition budget. We've increased money for grass mitigation, and now you're adding on top of that, the one thing we heard routinely last year was, what are we doing about illegal dumping? So in years past, we had a complaint that we didn't have enough code enforcement officers. We didn't have anybody picking up litter. We didn't have anybody picking up, doing enough grass mitigation. We've addressed all of those. So I don't want you to think that this year we're just focused on illegal dumping. You all have helped us really staff up and provide a pretty healthy amount of resources towards doing this in the city. One of the things we've talked about here is code can only do so much and cite so many people, and then someone else outside the city has to take action. And we've talked in this chamber about, are there other people who need to help us with the throughput there? So just for context, I wanted to offer that you all have already helped in the last 2 years increase Robert's ability to do good work in the public right of way.
Thank you. Been cleaned up significantly. You're not embarrassed to recommend a park to anyone here in the city. But I'm still saying it's a major operation that we still have to overcome. We got to get back and become the most beautiful city in this country again. And I just I think I'm citing my request, and I constantly get emails from people talking about how horrible some locations look and what can we do to clean it up. And, I do everything I can to try to ask people, let's just volunteer and clean it up. But that doesn't work all the time. But I still think we probably need additional funding just for cleaning up. Those are all of my, you want to speak again, Mr.?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the new personnel and the new equipment purchase for legal dumping, is there an allowance for someone that is in like a rover truck that that's all they do is drive, especially the routes that we know we have a lot of problems with, and look so that we can get ahead of, and I know that through 311 that they can file a complaint and they can send us the information on the sites. But if we had someone that's all they did, so we got ahead of it and notified your crews beforehand that, hey, we need to, and start scheduling pickups before it got to the point of people getting so angry that they're calling the news media and saying, this has been because I think that we probably know the areas that are the worst.
Pardon me. Yeah, we have some great institutional knowledge within the environmental enforcement team. So this supplementation, augmentation increase is going to go tremendously a long way to having a comprehensively useful personnel who not only do a more targeted approach, but also have the capacity, to do a complete cradle to grave, or beginning to end management of those types of issues. And again, we did add vehicles and equipment to provide us additional types of resources that will give us that kind of flexibility.
Councilman, I want to add, Robert wouldn't know this because it's not in his division, but This year in the executive division, we had a vacant position, in a part-time position, so up to 28 hours a week. And we are going to hire into that position a person whose job it is to do exactly that. That's all they will be doing, is driving around the city to the hotspots, identifying areas, feeding information to both Memphis Public Service Corps, to our illegal dumping crews. They're just going to be looking, and the person, I won't mention who it is yet, but she has a very critical eye for neighborhoods, a love for the city and for neighborhoods, and she's one of the people that says we should be doing better. So we're putting her into action, and I think it's going to be really helpful for us, because that's all she's going to do is focus on how do we make our city cleaner.
Great. And one more question. Director, how often do we cite lawn care companies, since it's grass mowing season again, for blowing the clippings, and then when we get into the fall, the leaves into our sewer system?
Well,
or drains?
Every time that we are made aware of it, we can capture them, we do. But we have to be able to identify them with, and take appropriate action. So that's done as a stormwater violation, not by code enforcement. Those are different groups. So the stormwater program team does those enforcement actions against lawn cares.
And are they required to go to environmental court if they are cited?
No, we have a different approach to that, and where we monitor for compliance.
Is there anything in there that says, first offense is a warning, second, but if we catch you 3 or 5 times and you're the same company doing it, and I don't know what kind of retribution we would have on them, but I know there's habitual offenders that are doing this, and that's their mode of operation. I mean, they don't care, and they're blowing the grass clippings and leaves into the drains.
The stormwater program has its own type of methodology. So we have an advisory board, and then we cite, and then based on the type of violation and the frequency of violations, and our first goal is to educate, and then from that point we can manage it through through fines and fees.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. You're welcome. I have another question. Will this include tires?
In what way, Councilwoman?
Collecting tires?
Oh, yes. Legal dumping is tires.
Okay,
it's everything.
Okay. Those are all the questions. Motion to approve. Can I get a second to this motion?
Jones, second.
Jones seconded. Okay, we have a motion that's been approved. Moved and second. All in favor of the operating budget general fund for public work, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That budget request has passed. Now we're moving on to, okay, let it be known that Councilwoman Logan has joined us as well. Now we're gonna go on to public works. What budget you wanna do next?
The stormwater fund, Councilwoman.
Stormwater fund.
Since street sweeping has become such a topic, we'll go ahead and do that one.
Okay.
So how is the stormwater funded operations of Public Works organized? The vast majority of it is under Public Works. There's a very small component under city engineering, but it's broken out into drain maintenance, heavy equipment services, flood control, stormwater program management, fleet support services for stormwater, and our sweeper department. So what are the strategic priorities associated with our FY23 operating budget request? I mentioned this a minute ago as part of our talk about our Mwb spend, but we established a stormwater program manager role to assist with developing solutions identified using citywide stormwater program master planning strategy. That is All Worlds is our program manager. We're very excited by that and what outcomes we hope to derive on having them as our program manager. So we're going to have a renewed focus on addressing flooding issues. We also restructured to create 2 new service centers. And so our storm and sewer fleet support services, we are moving our operations from over off of the depot, the sewer.
Am I the only one that can't hear inside the room?
No, I can't hear either.
Okay.
Same
I
here.
can't hear either.
This is Morgan. I can't hear either.
Okay.
And Frank, thank you for telling me my mic is on. You must hear me eating my popcorn.
Yes, ma'am, I'm getting hungry. I thank you much.
Nobody.
I wonder, do we need to come out and go back in?
I'm thinking there's something on there.
Since
Can
we
you
all
guys,
can hear
can you
each
hear
other.
me now?
Right.
Yeah.
Can you hear us now?
Can you hear me now?
Hello? Councilman Jones? They gotta call back in. Oh.
Welcome to the audio conferencing center. Please enter a conference ID. If you're the meeting organizer, press star now. After the tone, please record your name and then press pound. You're now joining the meeting. Please wait for the leader to...
Okay, Councilman Jones? Councilman Jones?
Yeah, no, I didn't have anything. We were just,
We
those
just
of
want
us
to make
online
sure
couldn't
you
hear.
can hear us. We're trying to test.
Yeah, we can now.
Okay,
Yes, we can
Robinson,
now.
Councilwoman Robinson?
I can hear you.
Okay, Councilwoman Easter Thomas?
I can hear you.
Okay, is that mainly everybody? Okay.
No, you
Logan?
got me, baby.
Who is
I
this?
can hear. I can hear you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, Councilman Ford?
Yep, I can hear you. Yep.
Okay, okay, we're back on. And you may continue. I'm sorry for the slight
No.
technical inconvenience.
It's perfectly fine. I'll start over. It's not a big deal. As I mentioned before, Public Works Stormwater Fund is an enterprise fund within the city, within Public Works Division. It supports Public Works primarily, and a small little portion of engineering, drainage design in that role. But it's broken down into drain maintenance, whose responsibility is for managing our stormwater infrastructure, heavy equipment who supports drain maintenance in their cleanup of our certain facilities, flood control, stormwater program, our new fleet support services, and our new sweeper department, our changes. As I stated a minute ago, we have established a new stormwater program manager who is all-world project management to assist with developing solutions for citywide stormwater master planning strategy. What does that mean? We're having a renewed focus on addressing flooding issues, which we hope to really have some great outcomes starting this year and in future years to kind of ensure we are doing what we can to mitigate flooding issues affecting property owners. We restructured to create two new service centers in Stormwater Fund, our storm and sewer fleet support services, and the sweeper department. Our fleet support services is an outcome of our restructuring out in Fraser at the Range Hills facility, where sewer department is going to be relocating its operations. We're constructing a series of new facilities. So we're going to have a 50-acre complex out there to support drain maintenance, heavy equipment, and environmental maintenance, inspections. It's a whole group. And part of that will be all the support of all the fleet that's going to be out there. And then the sweeper department. Our sweeper department has been not part of, it's been under another area, so we want to make it its own department because we want to make sure we can have a targeted approach to sweeping. It's dedicated funding for sweeping, and we can renewed focus on our sweeping program, including a new zoning development. Right now, our system we have a systematic way, but to me it could be better. by allocating sweepers to zones instead of the methodology we've used in the past, which was just more of a going to circle the city on a recurring basis to sweep as best they could. Now we're going to allocate to a zoned approach whereby you're going to have a sweeper in each area that's going to be responsible for that area. And we really think we're going to have improved sweeping outcomes with cleaning up and doing a better job overall. We're going to develop and implement a new public-facing street sweeper map, so you can see where the sweeping is happening in your neighborhood. We also face challenges with street parking with sweepers, so we try to make aware that we're getting ready to come down your street so that we can clear the street so it can be properly swept and avoid having cars in the way. And we're also looking at increasing sweeping capacity by having more sweepers, and we've also going to be purchasing, or we have purchased a new small sweeper for serving streets with bike lanes. Our sweepers will not fit down the street with a bike lane, so we're going to have to actually buy a smaller sweeper to service those areas. And now a couple of little items is we continue to negotiate a new permit with Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. The city has a MPDS permit for MS4s. So we are working on that as part of our negotiation with the state. And then we've expanded their facility out as I mentioned, out at the Range Hills facility and relocating our stormwater program. So our FY22 bridge analysis for FY23. You'll see some changes primarily in our capital outlay is the biggest changes. We're going to be purchasing some new fleet. We use our cash for that. It's not capitalized when we purchase fleet. In the stormwater fund, and we use capital outlay. And then we have some increased costs due to interest costs from our loan. We did a stormwater revenue bonds in 2019, $40 million, and so we are utilizing those funds, those funded costs, and so we're seeing increased costs related to the interest on that debt. Going to slide 7, our program Comparative Spending. As I mentioned, the vast majority of expenditures happen under Public Works Stormwater side, and then there's a small apportionment to engineering drainage design. And this, you'll see that the majority of those increases that I mentioned are under the Stormwater program, under Public Works. Next slide, slide 8, discussion of year-over-year changes in expenditures. Our miscellaneous professional services, there's been a slight adjustment. Pension and healthcare, there was an adjustment. We did have some increased costs related to professional services and other M&S, and we'll discuss that in a future slide. We have some, again, we are increasing some acquisitions. So capital outlay, there's a $483,000 increase. And then I mentioned before the debt service related cost increases. Revenue discussions on slide 10. The vast majority of our costs come in through fees. On your MLGW bill, you'll see your stormwater fee allocation that pays for those costs. That's about $36.9 million. And then there's a little bit that we recoup from fines and fees and use of other funds, use of other money and property. The next slide is 11. Discussion of year-over-year changes in revenues. There's minor changes in those from last year, mostly decreases and interest on investments and income and from investments. On the personnel side, which is slide 14, there's a net increase of 4 positions, but those are structural changes where we're moving positions from the sewer fund to the stormwater fund. So we're going to talk about the sewer fund here next. And so that the reallocation of personnel is about the movement of people to the new facility out at Fraser Range Hills. We have approximately 29 vacancies in the stormwater fund. We continue to work on those vacancies, utilizing, again, pay. We targeted some key areas, as I mentioned, in the general fund to kind of make sure we are doing a better job. And then, so that the reallocation of personnel is about the movement of people to the new facility out at Fraser Range Hills. We have approximately 29 vacancies in the stormwater fund. We continue to work on those vacancies, utilizing, again, pay. We targeted some key areas, as I mentioned, in the general fund to kind of make sure we are doing a better job. And we're going to we're taking another strategy with the sewer fund, and I'll talk about that when the sewer fund comes up. Major M&S expenditures, miscellaneous professional services. Professional services is our major expenditure for major M&S at $4.3 million. Outside equipment repair and maintenance is $1.8 million. Outside vehicle repair, $939,000. Utilities, $600,000. City shop fuel, $540,000. We have a security contract at $254,000. General M&S at $241,000. Lime, cement, and gravel, 210. City computer services, about 204. Pipe fittings and castings, 176,000. And then all others, which is basically anything around $100,000 or less, falls into those categories. The next slide is 17. What is a breakdown of our professional services contract? RCI, who does grass mowing, trimming, spraying, and litter control. We fund litter control service. We allocate funding to help with litter to the right-of-ways, and so that is funded by Stormwater. About $810,000 goes towards that effort. We have an agreement to with Thompson Machinery for Caterpillar, which is a type of heavy equipment for those types of specialty repairs. We have a specialty agreements with, engineering consulting agreements with ABS and Edward Tieford, who does for helping provide specialty advisory and engineering consulting for the city stormwater program. VZ Rubbish and Removal for asphalt cut and patch services. That's for work they do for cutting and patching related to drain maintenances repairs for when they have to make a stormwater underground pipe repair. And then uniforms, and then other, like 60 other vendors, which under smaller amounts covers $3 million. Account the details leases, slide 18, there are none in Stormwater Fund. And this next slide is 19, is our MWE slide. This is the same slide that was mentioned in the general fund, so I will not repeat myself again. It's the same amount of information presented, and so with that, I'll stop here and take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in the queue? No one's in the queue. I don't have any questions. Not having any questions, then can I have a motion to move this item?
Jones moves it.
Moved by Canales, second by Jones. All in favor of approving the fiscal year 23 operating budget request for the City of Memphis Public Works Stormwater Fund, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Any in opposition?
Aye.
Hearing none in opposition, this budget is passed, is approved. It gets better, you see.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, next.
Last one for Public Works is our sewer fund, and it's another one of our enterprise funded operations in Public Works. So slide 2 is a breakdown of the Public Works and sewer fund operations. The vast majority of it, again, falls under Public Works. There's a small section that funds sewer design and city engineering. The program is broken out in the Public Works into our environmental inspections, our pre-treatment industrial monitoring program. We have 2 of our treatment plants, which we call TE Maxon and MC Styles, north and south treatment plants. We have a lift station components, environmental administration, that's the group responsible for overseeing these operations. And then we have an environmental maintenance group. What are the key, next slide, slide 3, what are the key operating budget components of this year from a strategic perspective? We continue to focus on our citywide sewer master planning to support growth. We are also going to be focusing on our biosolids. I mentioned this in our capital budget, but from a perspective of our operation side, we're working on how we can improve biosolids, handling of those, and supporting that from a master planning perspective. We will continue to focus on our consent decree compliance, which is a key aspect of our program, due to the fact we have this regulatory, this federal consent decree requirements, and we're in year 9 of that program. We are in negotiating new permits with the state of Tennessee for both of our treatment plants. We are finalizing some interjurisdictional agreements with our external customers. We have reduced staffing in the sewer funded operations due to recurring vacancy challenges. So we did, and you'll see that we did reduce position count by 18 positions because we realized that of the challenges and vacancies, and since we haven't, we still have vacancies to support that. We reassess that as we move forward in future fiscal years. And then we, as I mentioned, in the Stormwater Fund, sewer funded operations, or certain aspects are relocating to the new facility out at Fraser offices. Going to slide 5, our FY22 expenditure bridge analysis for 23. There are some changes. Biggest changes will involve some of our costs for M&S due to our chemical costs, the big components, and then our interest costs have gone up due to our borrowing for our operations. Those are the biggest changes for the sewer fund, further in terms of our expenditures. Going to slide 7, our biggest components of the program spending fall under Public Works. There's a small allocation to sewer design under engineering. And most of the expenditure increases are in Public Works. We'll talk about that shortly. The discussion of year-over-year changes in expenditures, you can see in this slide that salaries and other benefits due to increased costs, and raises, and operational changes that we targeted in certain positions that we wanted to ensure we are more competitive with the private market due to, like as I mentioned, trying to get this down on our number of vacancies. Chemical cost, this PAA, it says PPA, I'm sorry, there's no such thing. PAA costs have been going up as we are required to disinfect. So that's the biggest driver in this number. And then we have materials, miscellaneous services and charges, cost increases. And then carry forward encumbrances, the decrease in number of carry forward encumbrances. And then we are planning to do some equipment acquisitions of the at about $1.1 million in changes there. And that's due to the fact that we do capital outlay within our budget, within our fund, as a sewer funded cash expenditure. Debt service costs are up due to SRF and WIFIA loans. And then depreciation cost and payment in lieu of taxes changes. And then a contribution to fund balance of $9.1 million. Slide 10 is our bridge analysis for revenues. The majority of our revenues are charges for services. Just like the Stormwater Fund on your MLGW bill, you pay a sewer fees. Those come into us from MLGW, and then we bill industrial customers for their additional treatment costs. But that's 99% of our revenues come from those charges. And then you can see that we do recoup fines and fees. We do foresee some significant increases in fines and fees due to our targeted issues with some industries. So that is something that we are working on as part of our strategy to the industrial monitoring and pretreatment program. And so that's the majority right there of the fees. In terms of just year-over-year changes in revenues, again, I mentioned we are focusing on industrial monitoring, so we foresee some significant increases in fines and forfeitures related revenues. Increase in city development, we support, as you can imagine, having a connection to the city sewer is instrumental to having a development and a growth. So again, there are costs related to that, and so we foresee revenue increases from that opportunity. And then others increase in usages for sewer fees due to the connection for that city's sewer system. It's a net change of $4.7 million. Excuse me. And slide 14 for authorized complement. As I mentioned, we did decrease our complement by 18 positions due to our recurring vacancy challenges. We still have 57 vacancies in the sewer funded operations, but We feel like that we're in a good position right now as we continue to target on vacancies with the, strategically with funding and our increases where we have struggled the greatest. So that's where we feel we're going to continue to make progress with that approach. Under major, slide 16, major M&S, you'll see that our biggest expenditure is chemicals, $27.9 million. And that may sound like a lot, but it is a pretty significant demand on our services to treat, especially disinfection, in order to comply with our permit. Miscellaneous professional services is $24.1 million. Well, there's another slide to get greater detail on that. Utilities is $13.6 million. Our treatment plants are very heavy utility utilization, about $1 million a month to operate our wastewater treatment plants with both water and or electrical. So it's a pretty significant cost. Miscellaneous service and charges, $5.2 million. Our materials and supplies, $3 million. Outside equipment repair, $1 million, $1.1 million. Cost allocation to the general fund of $1.0 million. Outside vehicle repair, $1 million. Lime, cement, and gravel, $1 million. City shop fuel, $750,000 roughly. Claims at $400,000 and equipment rental at $400,000 and all other M&S at $1.9 million. Account detail for professional services. ACUF Enterprises, sewer line repair at various locations. We utilize contractors who can do, we have 3,150 miles of sanitary sewer we're responsible for. We do a lot in-house, but we do utilize contractors to subsidize our work. And so that's one of our largest expenditure types. We also use Xylem for dewatering. We have to do emergency sewer bypassing, pumping services. So that's about $3 million in allocation for that. Sanitary sewer cleaning with Sanitech. Again, we do a lot of heavy cleaning of our sanitary sewer system to make sure it's operating and it's appropriately, removing blockages and other obstructions. We do work with VZ Rubbish, who does our asphalt inlay, like with regards to our street cuts, about $1.6 million. Lateral sewer lining with Humbard Contracting. That's basically where they do a specialty type of lining for sewer trenchless rehabilitation. And there's a lot of other various expenditure types. I won't go down each and every one of these if there's any questions about those. It varies anywhere from professional services to, again, specialty support for either our lift stations or our wastewater treatment plants and or our environmental inspections or maintenance. Our account details leases, slide 18. There are two right now. The first one is Memphis Depot, but as I mentioned, this will be the last year of that lease because we are relocating all that staff to this new home in Fraser. Then we have a lease for 800 acres that we utilize down in Pigeon Industrial Land next to the treatment plant. That we use that for biosolids. So but it costs us $85,000 a year for use of that land. It's a very good deal. And then the last slide is our Mwb Utilization, which is the exact same slide that was presented in Stormwater and the General Fund. So I will not repeat that one since it covers it well. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Well, thank you. At this time, Councilman Jones would like to be recognized. Councilman Jones.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Ms. Connect, talk about how you indicated that you reduced the complement by 18, but that still leaves, I think, 57 vacant positions out of 350 some odd total positions. How are we addressing that?
Yes, sir. The vast majority of our vacancies in the sewer fund are at the treatment plants. And that's where we actually did the vast majority of our reductions came from those operations. We target, as I mentioned before, the wastewater treatment plant operator, the mechanical operator positions, and other positions. We have targeted some significant increases in pay for those positions to improve the salaries so that we can be more competitive. So that's where we are really working diligently to kind of make sure we can be more competitive. We can hire We did also remove our step increases so that we bring people in so they don't have to wait 2 years to be maxed out in their pay. So that was another thing we targeted so that we can, again, be more competitive.
Okay, and where were we? So, did we have a net from? You may not have this in front of you, but did we have a net increase in number of employees from last year to this year?
No.
Or decrease, or did it stay the same?
No, we've had. I mean, I would have to verify. Our vacancies have come down overall slightly. It's been. I would say just based on my experience, it's been minimal change.
Okay. Then I guess that I want is, are things still getting done with such a high number of vacancies?
I'm sorry, sir. Say that again.
Is the work getting done? It just seems like about 15% of the workforce is not there. I'm just wondering are we missing? Should there be reason that the council should be concerned about the number of vacancies?
Well, I mean, our facilities are staffed. We have not had any operational challenges at our treatment plants. We utilize overtime to help make sure that we have adequate operational support for those facilities. So I mean, to date, we have not had any operational challenges. We do strive to kind of work to fill vacancies because it would be good to not rely on overtime.
And let's see, I'm looking for your overtime number. Does anyone have that handy?
Yeah, there was a net increase in overtime. Let me see. I had that. Let me find that for you. It went up by $630,000. It went from 2.07 to $2.7 million. So we did increase it by 23%.
Okay. And then my next question is, I don't have all the information in front of me. How much additional debt did we take on to account for the $7.2 million in interest costs?
I know that. So, for example, the WIFIA loan that was $156 million, we've been expending that loan at the increasing numbers. Increasing amount of frequency as that work is completed. We've taken on some additional SRF loans recently. We did $135 million bond sales in 2020, right? In 2020, and we have utilized about $60 million of that. So that's where the majority of those costs are coming from.
Okay, so if I could have what would be helpful, just the schedule of the debt issuance, say over the past 3 years. If we've only utilized 60, well, I guess we've issued the entire thing. So all of the proceeds are there.
Well, we've done $60 million of bonds. The WIFIA we've utilized probably half. We're probably about $40 million of the WIFIA, and then SRF. I'll tell you what. We can give you a good overview of all of our debt types and how that's changed.
Okay, and then my last question is: I'm looking at slide number 8, depreciation. Purchase, depreciation on own funds. Can I get an explanation of that $12,500,000?
Yes, sir. So, I mean, we have straight line depreciation methodology for our capital cost, and that changes based on the amount of capital expenditures. So it's basically, depending with all the construction and new assets, there's going to be a change in our depreciation cost.
Oh,
Okay, council,
okay.
may I,
Yeah. Yes.
Ford? Shirley Ford, Chief Financial Officer. Just to remind, our council members that the stormwater and sewer water funds are enterprise funds. So they are maintained on a full accrual basis, which requires you to record your depreciation on your capital assets. So every year, you're going to see that entry on there. And so our team looks at the capital assets that are listed for each one of those funds and calculates the straight line depreciation in accordance with GAAP.
Okay, so which accounted for, I guess we took more depreciation last year than we'll be taking this year to the tune of that 12.5.
Chief Ford,
Yes.
Councilman
Okay.
Jones, she's seeking information for you.
Okay.
While we're waiting for that information, let it be noted that Chairwoman Jamita Swearingen has joined us as well.
I apologize for the delay. I'm Shirley Ford, Chief Financial Officer. We seem to have a discrepancy in our numbers here because I'm showing a $15 million in depreciation. So we will double check that line and bring that back to council.
Okay, thank you.
Are those all your questions, Councilman Jones?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Councilwoman Logan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Director Krennic, for your presentation. I just had a couple of questions. The vehicle repair on page 16, or any vehicle repair, will that be decreased now that we're building the vehicle repair shops? I know there's the vehicle repair shops being built at the Coke, I guess that facility, and there's one in my district. So just trying to see how that will impact the outside vehicle repair that I see on page 16. And then the second question, the outside printing. Well, I'm sorry, shop charges and vehicle repair. And then the second one is the outside printing versus City Hall printing. It's been zero, and I noticed that even though it's a small amount, that it went to $6,000 for the outside printing, and I'm seeing the City Hall printing. If you could speak to that as well. Those are on page 21.
Yes, ma'am. So first off, the sewer fund and stormwater fund maintain their own fleets independent of general services fleet. So we don't, does not reflect whatever Coke is going to be happening with relocation to the Coke facility. We are creating our own new maintenance facility out at the Fraser office to manage the fleet. Our cost because the fleet's not really changing, we're just moving them. We're moving operations to another location. We don't foresee significant changes or decreases because we do rely on, we do utilize outside vendors to help support our operations. There's just so much we can do, and then we may have to rely on like a specialty contractor for transmissions or something like that. It's just going to depend, but no, I don't foresee that decreasing, Councilwoman. And then City Hall printing and outside printing.
I just noticed that the outside printing was 0 for years, and then it was 6,000 for last year and this year, in addition to the City Hall printing. I was just wondering what the addition was.
Yeah, I don't really have an answer for that. I mean, I know it's from 0, but we're using this. We use that line for outside printing. I can get back to you. We have to follow back up with that one, Councilwoman.
No problem. Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you, Chairwoman. I yield back.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Finale, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well,
Director, going back to your, the 2.7 million in overtime, is that due to the being understaffed, 57 people, or does this crew respond to weather-related events, and is that part of your overtime expense?
Well, the sewer funded operations do have a component of weather related. It's not directly like a storm. It's seasonal because of depending on what happens with the river, it may influence the operations. But I mean, overtime is a reflection of staffing challenges.
So I don't know what the average pay is for these 57 unfilled jobs, but would it make more sense to true up the salaries of these employees and try to hire them as opposed to the amount we're spending in overtime?
So the average salary is about $60,000
for these 57 open positions.
Yes, roughly about $60,000. We did target, with some significant increases those positions that we felt like were the most challenging and significant increases. And then as I mentioned, we removed the step increases. So it used to be that you would have to come in, you had to do 6 months,
Right.
12 months, 18 months, 24 months to get to full pay.
Right.
Now by taking that out, we've eliminated that aspect as well. So we really think we're hopefully making some great changes to make it more advantageous or desirable to come to work for the city. Working at a wastewater treatment plant it's tough, but it's a great
not the most
career.
coveted job out there.
It's not sexy, but it's really important.
It is very important. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I had.
thank you. I have one question. You mentioned that if you were paying fees to Memphis Light, Gas, and Water for sewage fees, it was said in the very beginning on I was on page 10 when I wrote it or something. Do we have to pay fees to Memphis Light, Gas, and Water?
We pay them to collect fees for us.
Oh, okay.
So when they charge on the Mwb bill for the sewer and stormwater fund, they do collect. We do pay a fee for that service.
Oh, okay. And how much was that?
It's 1% for the sewer fund and 2% for the stormwater fund.
Okay. All right. That was my only question. I wasn't clear on that. Okay. having no one else, he has another quick question. Councilman Canale, you're recognized.
I was just looking back at the 5-year trend of chemicals, and I know you said how important the chemicals were, but 9.9 million in FY '19 to 27.9 now. Has the price gone up that much on chemicals? Are we covering that much more area?
No, we just recently started fully disinfecting at both treatment plants. And it was phased in over time. So yeah, we are now at the point where it's pretty much all aspects of our operation. It's a significant cost, yes.
Okay.
But we get additional revenues for that as well. So it's not only, industry pays about 50% of that cost. So the rest of it's borne by all the other ratepayers.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. May I get a motion? A motion has been moved to approve the operating budget for the sewage fund for public works. May I get a second? Second on the sewer fund? Come on, people. Have we lost you again?
Second.
Robertson seconded, thank you. All in favor? Please respond by aye. Is there anyone in opposition to this budget? Not hearing any, this passes.
Can we take a TV timeout before Chief Ward starts?
Sure.
Actually, it's not my turn next, it's HR's turn next. But could I also, just for the record, for the approval that you just gave, realize that there could be an amendment to that based on the corrected depreciation amount? Is that acceptable? We'll
We're coming back, convening back with the City of Memphis budget hearings. And the next one up is for the fiscal year 2023 operating budget request for human resources for the City of Memphis. Please state your name, give us your title, and you can proceed after that. And have a good one.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Alex Smith. I'm the Chief HR Officer for the City of Memphis. And this is our presentation for the General Healthcare and Opeb, or Retiree Healthcare Funds. To start off, I just want to say that our HR team has really worked hard for you in 2021, implementing several programs to help the City of Memphis continue to work and thrive. With the $120 million you allocated to us in FY22 across the General Healthcare and Opeb funds, we provided healthcare and wellness to over 15,000 employees and retirees. In addition, we hired more than 1,100 candidates and we trained over 2,200 employees. We also launched a new fire cadet program, and we locally spent 34% with MWBEs in the process. We also made it a priority to help others by volunteering our time with the Memphis Shelby County Schools. But every day our division helps employees on a personal level, whether it's connecting them to our EAP program during a crisis or encouraging them to reach their educational dreams. For example, one of our recruiters encouraged a solid waste employee who had been with the City of Memphis over 30 plus years to get his high school diploma. And I'm proud to say that that employee this last December actually graduated with his diploma. In addition, our programs have helped employees reach their goals with our student loan contribution program, where we've helped over 500 employees reduce their student loan debt, totaling over $313,000 in savings. And our tuition reimbursement program has spent over $400,000 to support our employees. This is great work, but we face continuous challenge. We are not immune to the Great Resignation as other large employers. We've seen our resignation rate as an organization move from 3.9% to 6.7% in the last year, and an increase in our number of vacancies. We currently have over 89 positions posted on our website right now. We're also seeing an increase in healthcare trends related to COVID, and our medical claims have increased by 9%, and so cost-saving measures are important there too. This year, we're asking for $8.8 million for the general fund, $97 million for the healthcare fund, and $23 million for the Opeb fund to continue our impactful work of supporting the care and livelihood of employees and retirees. And so to do that, we have the same flat structure as before with 63 full-time employees focused on the core main areas that help us deliver these services to both our employees and retirees and to work with candidates. Our purpose, vision, and mission continue to remain the same, which is all about building an engaged workforce to make life better for Memphians every day. And our goals continue to focus on attracting and retaining talent, driving culture change, driving automation, and driving employee engagement. As we go into FY23, the way we're going to focus on doing that is recruiting and retaining talent, recruiting the hard to employ, and particularly partnering with the community affairs team with the Public Service Corps and Opportunity Youth, and focusing on retiree wellness and recruiting retirees across the city as well. And speaking of recruiting, because of the Great Resignation, we've had to really double down on our efforts with recruiting. So everything from citywide career events, which we actually partnered with the council to do that job fair last year, a social media campaign, and particularly we're proud of our Instagram program, which has been really exciting to showcase really what our jobs can do. And then we have a newsletter as well that we partner with our marketing team to facilitate, which helps us feature our jobs and encourage people to apply, which we have over 41,000 subscribers at this point. And then we have a sign-on bonus program, and we continue to fill our jobs within 75 days or less, which beats the national average of 96 days for a public sector employer. As we go into our general fund request, as I mentioned, we're requesting $8.8 million, which is right in line with what our funding budget was for last year. And when you look at our adopted budget of $8.5, that is, we had an encumbrance that rolled forward to $325,000. So 8.8 is right in line with what our funding budget was last year. And from a comparative spending standpoint, once again, you see that our request of $8.8 million is in line with our funding budget of what we had last year as well. And there is a slight increase on the administration side, and that is related to some personnel costs with the 2% increase that's built in our budget, as well as some salary promotions and vacancy costs that we have in. And so this shows the discussion for year-over-year expenditures with that full-time salary line having that extra 144,000, as well as the potential raises listed as 119,000, with a net change of 344,000. Once again, based on our funding budget last year, we're essentially flat. And from a revenue standpoint, we have a small amount of revenue that comes from the AmeriCorps Vista program. We have 7 AmeriCorps Vistas, and so this 39,000 is needed to support that program. In terms of personnel information, our personnel continues to remain relatively flat. We do have 3 vacancies that we're currently hiring for right now. With M&S, we continue to spend the majority of our money towards public safety and our OJI services to help support our employees. Also for recruiting and hiring purposes and supporting the promotional testing process. And this is the list of all those categories, and you see that our OJI claims administrators at the top, which is a contractual amount, and then from there you have our FMLA and then police testing and fire testing services connected to that. Our rent for the Union Extended building, $70,000 a year, contractual once again. And then to show our MWB spend, we're at 34%. So that concludes our general fund budget. I will now stop here to see if there's any questions.
Councilman Morgan, you recognize.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My number one concern in this budget is whether we're going to meet our police recruitment goals. And so since this is a split responsibility between HR and the police division, I'll ask some questions now and follow up with them as well. And look, I get it. I think it's a reality across the country that there are not enough qualified police recruits to fill every academy seat in every police department, but there are enough recruits to fill the MPD academy if we're willing to find them. So to that extent, y'all came to us months ago, maybe at the end of last year, and talked about the goal, or the new goal that y'all are committing to, was 300 police recruits over the next year. So we'd have at least a net 150 new officers. Now that it's been some time, where are we towards that goal, and what does it look like over the next fiscal year?
Great. So I'm going to answer that question, and then I have Fonda Fouché here, who's our talent management officer that oversees our recruiting for the city of Memphis, to also answer as well. So we have been working diligently in partnership with the police department as well as our communications office to be able to develop a robust program. So first thing is that, and we thank the council for this, for their support, we have the ARPA dollars that allow for us to enhance our relocation bonus up to 10,000 and our sign-on bonus up to 15,000 to help us be more aggressive in our recruiting. In addition, we also have the residency requirement that's been eliminated as well, that helps give us some leverage too. And then we have focused on really advertising and marketing in the community aggressively, and having local job fairs, and helping to get the word out there that this is a honorable profession, this is a great profession. We also have instituted some efficiencies in our processes as well, in terms of making it faster for people to get through our processes, while of course maintaining the quality too. In terms of our progress, I'm going to let Fonda talk about that.
So hello. So right now we have 57 recruits ready to start on July 2nd. With the changes in the process, we process everyone that passes background, and they police sends that information over to us. We start them. We're starting them every pay period, so they don't have to wait to July 2nd to start. And currently, right now, we have about 40 police recruits that have already started, that will start the academy in July.
So we're making progress, and we continue to focus on getting the word out there. I believe we have another job fair scheduled for early June 4th, and we're continuing to just beat the pavement and be aggressive. We're also looking at a recruiting center concept similar to what you've seen in the private sector, to be able to create a one-stop shop for people to be able to not only learn about our police academy, but also be able to get quickly processed in one place. So we're scouting that now as well.
Okay. Do you project that we're going to meet that goal of 300 new recruits?
Right now, yes, we do think it's early enough in the year for us to gain ground. And we still have, I believe, over 700 applications or so that we're assessing and working through. So we do think that we'll be on target to be able to get there. But of course, we have to continue to hit the pavement. We have to see what happens with the labor market as well. There are a number of factors there, but we're working very hard.
Okay, because with the hard numbers I heard were 40 that were already in process, and then about 57 that are going to start. How many more classes do we have left? Because if it's only 2 left, we'd have to average 100.
The model that MPD is moving to, as they get recruits in, we're going to be starting them every 2 weeks. And once they get a group of 40 or 50, then they will go ahead and start an academy. So we're looking to have more than 2 classes this year.
Okay. And to Chief Ford, so one of my questions would also be, as I look at the police budget, and we'll get into this later, it looks like the salaries are projected flat. A lot of the personnel expenses are projected flat from what was adopted last year to being proposed this year. So between now and the police budget, I'd love to get some more detail about those personnel numbers. If we're expecting 150 net new officers, I know that gets my dog has something to say about that too. I know that that those positions aren't full year rounds, so on average they might be full for 6 months out of the year, so it's a reduced number, but I'm not seeing any change to our personnel numbers in police reflecting this increase in recruitment. So either the goals, as it appears now on paper, either the goal is not going to be met and the budget is correct, or we're going to meet our goal and the budget has underestimated the number of personnel that we'll have next year. Or maybe the numbers that we were adopted last year were so far off that it balances out. I don't know. Actually, those forecast numbers would help to see that. So that's my primary concern is, are we committing the resources to actually recruit and do what is necessary? And this is a huge HR. This is a big undertaking for y'all. And so that y'all are able to pursue and achieve this goal with the same number of resources and personnel would surprise me, because it seems like an enormous amount more of workload, especially given the headwinds that we're facing across the country. So something doesn't quite seem to fit. Still looking into it, and I want to make sure that this budget reflects that goal that we've set out. And one, that we can achieve it, and two, it's absolutely necessary, and we promised it to the people. And if that's not the case, then this budget has some serious concerns in my judgment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
So just to address one concern there, one of the key components in shifting strategy that Chief Davis and I agreed to is making, really creating more of an established partnership with the Academy to have more officers engaged in the recruiting process. And so Chief Davis is working through building out more of a on-the-ground recruiting team and backgrounds team there at the Academy that can help facilitate this. So while HR, with our limited resources, is doing our part, MPD is actually stepping up to do more to help in the fight for talent and to get the name out there. We're also encouraging more officers through our referral bonus program as well. So we recognize that in order to really do this, it's all hands on deck, and Chief Davis is willing to commit resources to help support that as well. So that's another component.
Okay, thank you. I'll look for that in their budget.
Good, thank you. Chief Ford would like to speak. You're recognized. Chief Ford.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. To Councilman Morgan, thank you. Those are all very good questions. And you see in the full-time salaries over for police that we can certainly talk about those, and I'm sure we will during the police presentation. The FY22 adopted budget was budgeted with 2,200 police officers. We are currently at about 1,900. So we are running under budget on salaries for police currently, and you can kind of see that offset a little bit in their overtime and what we anticipate as we bring those officers on, that you will see that movement back into the salaries and the reduction into the overtime.
Okay, not seeing anyone else in the queue. We're going to have a motion. Can I get a motion? Canali moves it for me. Can I get a second on this operation budget for the human resources? Was that Dr. Warren I heard?
Ford.
Ford, okay. Ford seconded. Thank you. All in favor of this budget signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition to the budget signify by saying aye. Nay,
Morgan abstained.
Okay, repeat. Morgan, you abstain?
Morgan abstains.
Okay, thank you. And this general fund for Human Resources Division is approved, passes.
And so now we will talk about the healthcare fund. So for the healthcare fund, which is for our active employees, we have a little over 13,000 employees. We're seeing more of a even split between our choice plan and our select plan. And to remind you, our choice plan is our preferred PPO network, and our select plan is more of our narrow network. And so we're seeing a shift, which is helping us with balancing out the cost. We also doubled down on our focus in helping our employees during the pandemic by offering a $250 incentive for COVID vaccinations and also offering free COVID testing and vaccinations on site. We currently have about 56% of our employee base that are vaccinated. And then because mental health has now become it's always been an emerging concern, but it's even more so during the pandemic, we established a partnership with Talkspace to offer additional mental health resources for our employees, especially because 75% of our employees are in a car or a truck. And so being able to have mobile access to mental health resources we thought was really important. As we move into FY23, we continue to focus on developing our total rewards philosophy to really focus on attracting and retaining talent for the city of Memphis, and of course, managing our healthcare spending to be fiscally responsible. In terms of what's happening with healthcare costs, we have seen an increase in our medical claims trend year over year. It's gone up by 9%, and that's primarily due to an increase in utilization, and whether that's through aspects of COVID or deferred care. We also have seen some of our prescription costs go down, but that has to do with some specialty drug costs going down year over year. That being said, we do anticipate an increase in our healthcare spend, and so our claims reflect that. So going into the expenditure discussion, we are expecting to spend more on healthcare this upcoming fiscal year, and you can see a little over 4% increase in our claims experience that we anticipate. We all also are receiving a higher rebates, which are contractually from our pharmacy. So we're able to contribute to our fund balance based off that. But overall, once again, we're seeing an increase in our healthcare trends. And so this budget reflects that. So comparative spending, you'll see that we have an increase, particularly in the select plan, and overall increase of 6% for the overall budget. But once again, as I mentioned, we're able to offset that a little bit with some pharmacy rebates, which help us to contribute back to the healthcare fund. And this reflects this as well in terms of some of the personnel costs, and once again, the increase in the healthcare claims expense. And this shows the revenue overall, and here you can see that pharmacy rebate that we anticipate of $6.5 million was once again able to offset some of the costs for the budget, but we are seeing an increase in our claims expense. And this comparative revenue shows that once again, with the increase in the expense, you see an increase in our premium income, but also we have the offset with the pharmacy rebate. In terms of our personnel, it's staying relatively the same. We are moving a resource over to Opeb, once again, to help us with our retiree focus and retiree wellness. Our M&S expenditures are staying flat year over year, and we're at $6.4 million with a focus on medicals. And here's an account detail with the Talkspace being at the top, as well as our actuarial and other wellness type services. And then our rent for Union extended at $250,000. And that concludes my presentation for the healthcare fund.
There's no one in the queue? No one has any? Okay. Councilwoman Easter Thomas, you are being recognized.
Oh, Chair, I don't have my hand up. I do have something, but it's probably better for the end after everything's wrapped up, but I don't have anything for healthcare.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is a separate one. Okay, I need a motion on this. Can I get a second on this?
Move, second.
Ford seconded. Okay, all in favor of the healthcare fund materials fund that was presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, signify by saying nay. This passes and approved. Next, you may continue.
Thank you. Now we will talk about other post-employment benefits, or what we call Opeb Fund, or also known as retiree health care. So for our retirees, we've seen an increase in our group health insurance, which is primarily due to the sales tax referendum. And we also have seen an increase in our private public exchange pre-65 enrollments as well, which is just interesting. And we've seen a slight decrease in our private exchange Medicare enrollments year over year. As we go into the new fiscal year, we continue to anticipate increase in our group health insurance enrollment as well as our pre-65 enrollment. Our FY23 goals are focused on retiree health care and really helping to support the retirees. And we are doubling down on this focus of providing more support and engagement for our retirees and looking at how we can center programs around wellness and also education related to retirement saving and pension to help support them. And of course, we do all of this while wanting to be fiscally responsible and managing our Opeb liability. From an expenditure standpoint, we are remaining relatively flat going into the FY23 budget request. Our budget request is $23 million. We do anticipate a slight increase in our claims with the retiree, once again, related to the medical trend that we have been seeing at $15 million. Program comparative spending. Once again, we're seeing a slight increase by 8%, 1.7 million, and that is driven by the medical healthcare claims that we anticipate will be increasing year over year. And this reflects that once again, you can see the healthcare claims expense increasing year over year. From a revenue discussion, we do have to support the OPEB with transfer in money, and that's supported through both the sales tax referendum fund as well as the general fund. And so there is a need to have some additional transfer in to support the fund. But once again, we're asking for $23 million for the OPEB fund to support it going forward. And once again, the net change year over year is 1.7 million. From a personnel standpoint, we'll be adding one resource to help support the program. Our M&S is staying relatively flat year over year. And here's a list of our major expenditures, and primarily our expend is related to consulting fees, particularly for the actuarial liability. And so that concludes our OPEB presentation.
Okay, Councilwoman Easter Thomas, you're recognized.
Chair, I don't have my hand up. I am trying to switch devices so somebody can let me in the meeting, but I don't have my hand up.
All right, sorry about that. Okay, I need a motion.
I move to approve.
I'll second it.
The first motion by Canali, Robertson, the second.
Jones, second.
Thank you.
I do have a question before the question is called, Madam Chair.
Councilman Jones, you're recognized.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ms. Smith.
Good afternoon.
Chief, we aren't anticipating any increases in premiums for employees or retirees this year, are we?
So we're still working through finalizing. However, we do anticipate an increase in premiums, as you know, but not fully for both the choice and select. Ideally, it would be the choice plan that may have an increase in premiums as we've done in the past. We will be seeking to keep the select plan flat. And more, we're working on the plan design. More information will come at the Healthcare Oversight Committee meeting, which I think is in July.
Okay, so we won't have any of that before we approve the budget for this fiscal year?
No, in accordance with the resolution, we present any plan design changes at the Healthcare Oversight Committee meeting. However, we do try to have a rough estimate of where we think the healthcare fund will be based on medical claims trend, and so that's what we center and anchor our budget on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jones. Okay, we have that. Okay, Councilwoman.
I'm back in the queue, Chair.
Okay, come on, Councilwoman Thomas.
Hopefully my phone doesn't die before, but I did want to. Is this the last presentation for HR, or do we have another one?
Yes, this is the last one.
This is the last one. This is the last one.
Okay, I'm switching over to the computer. Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I did want to bring up during this budget on the resolution that this, I think, let me not lie, I think everybody on the council put on with it, making Juneteenth a holiday with the city, and also in the resolution's note says a paid holiday within the city of Memphis to begin June 19th, 2022 during fiscal year 2022. I know that we had some discussion last year, 2021, on waiting to see what the organizations, the unions wanting to, what did they want to do? Switch it out or whatever. And I'll let Chief Smith speak to that on what their answers were. But ultimately, it's a council decision on whether to go forth with what we agree with in the resolution to make Juneteenth a paid holiday, an additional paid holiday, or whether the council, as part of this budget, I guess it's not part of this budget, but still something we need to figure out before June, is switching it. I have always been on the side of including it as a paid holiday as the resolution was written. I think we've talked about items so far this budget that will allow for what was the $1 million price tag given to be substantiated in the fiscal year and fiscal years to come. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, CFO or Chief Smith, but it seems as though we would just have to locate that for this year. But it seems as though we have savings to do that for the fiscal year coming up and the fiscal years to come. So I did want to put that up for discussion, that it needs to be included in the fiscal year for next year's budget, also be guaranteed to be a paid holiday this June 19, 2022.
So, Madam Chair, I can give a little bit of context, and then I'll let Chief Ford give some additional comments as well. So, in 2020, the council presented a resolution requesting Juneteenth. Following the council's request, the administration asked that the council identify a current paid holiday to exchange with that. We estimated the cost of the additional pay holiday to be about $1 million. The council asked the administration to survey city employees. In that survey, President's Day was voted as a top holiday to exchange with 1,123 votes. And then the administration presented to council a resolution to swap President's Day with Juneteenth, but the council did not vote on that. At this point, President's Day is listed in all 7 MOUs. Going through the last labor negotiation process this past March 2022, the associations did not agree to swap out or exchange the holiday, and the administration would not agree to add it. So we're at an impasse from that perspective. And so at this point, we're awaiting council's decision related to what happens with Juneteenth.
Chief Ford would like to be recognized. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman Johnson. Shirley Ford, Chief Financial Officer. We have not included an additional cost in the FY22 budget for an additional holiday, nor is it projected in the FY23 budget for an additional holiday.
Councilwoman Easter Thomas, you have anything else?
Well, we passed the resolution, so we need to figure out how to include it. And all 13 members are on it. If any 13 members would like to, say anything or see how we can get this taken care of, but June 19th is a month away, so we want to ensure that we are doing what we decided, and if we're not going to do that, then we need to publicly do that today.
Okay. Councilman Jones is in the queue. Let me recognize him. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that the fact that the bargaining units in the administration could not come to an agreement about swapping, I don't think that usurps the council's decision to add it. So that was more so the administration's compromise. When the council did not adopt it, and then there was an agreement between the two, I don't think that negates what the will of this body was. So it is the appropriate time, since we are talking about budget, that
because there wasn't an agreement between the bargaining units and the administration, I don't think that handcuffs the council and takes off the table what the resolution was that we passed. So somehow, shape, form, or fashion, I think that needs to be included in this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. I'd like to recognize Councilman Canali. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I fully support the June 19th holiday, but it was my understanding that when we did that last year that it was going to be a swap, that we were going to delete one because nobody else has 14 paid holidays. We're at 13. And maybe I'm wrong and remember wrong, but I thought that there was no appetite for a 14th paid holiday. So maybe we need to revisit that.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is anyone else wanting to be recognized on this subject?
If I can just.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Well, I wanted to respond to
Councilman
that.
Jones.
I think my interpretation was a little bit different. We were willing to see if there was any agreement between the administration and the bargaining units, but I don't think that we were going to take it off the table if they didn't come to any agreement. I may have, my recollection may be different.
Okay, Councilman Canali, you're recognized.
Chief Smith, did we send out a survey to city employees?
Yes, sir.
What were the results of that?
That 1,100 elected to swap President's Day for Juneteenth.
And 1,100, how many participated in the survey?
I don't have that in front of me, but I can get it for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Desires to be recognized on this subject?
Chair.
Yes, Councilwoman Easter Thomas.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I will reiterate what Councilman Jones said. The discussion on swapping was because we were told it was no way that we could do that, adding it as a holiday, because as Councilman Canali said, we were the only ones with a certain amount of holidays due to us having the observance of Martin Luther King. But that still, as Councilman Jones said, that still doesn't negate the fact that we're trying to add it. We were trying to do a compromise, but as Chief Smith said, that compromise couldn't be made in the MOU. So I guess we're back to what was originally in the resolution. So I guess I'm not hearing any solutions. So my question is two questions to Chief Ford and Chief Smith. Are we available to have June 19th as a paid holiday this year, 2022, or are we not?
Chief Ford. Chief McGowan.
It is not a holiday this year. The administration cannot make it a holiday. It's up to council to make it a holiday. Any action on this matter lies with council.
We made it a holiday 2 years ago in 2020.
Do you care to respond, Chief McGowan? No response to that, Councilwoman Easter Thomas.
Okay, so is it on record that the wishes of this body with the resolution that was made will not be honored? Or is there another way that we can figure this out? Because this is a substitute. So the first one said June 2021, and then we went back and changed it for June 2022. And council records, this is on June 16th, 2020.
So in order for that to happen, the budget has to be amended. So you would need to make a motion to amend the budget for FY22 and for FY23.
I so move. What would be the fiscal note attached to that?
And second.
$1 million.
Okay, the attachment, for
So
fiscal
moved.
note is $1 million. Okay?
So moved.
Now, let's back up. We got another motion on the floor, and this is a second motion. So this is not, we got two different motions going on. The first motion is to amend the current fiscal budget of 22 for $1 million. And then you're also adding it for 23. But the first motion we need to pass is the Post-Employment Benefit Fund, the last budget we just heard. So can I get a vote on all in favor of this budget, the Post-Employment Benefit Fund? We had a motion and a second. I just need all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Not hearing any, that passes. Now we have on the floor the motion to amend the current 2022 budget to enable us to financially support June 19th for this coming year. All in favor of that? Question.
Well, Madam Chair, I was ready, that being the case, I was ready to make two motions, one for this current year and then one for the next fiscal year.
Okay, let's deal with one each then, I guess.
Okay. Yes, so I move to amend the fiscal year 2022 budget by $1 million to account for Juneteenth of 2022.
And I second that, Easter Thomas.
Okay, we got a motion to amend the current 2022 budget to account for Juneteenth with a financial impact of $1 million. All in favor of this amendment to the current budget, respond with aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Canal abstaining. Anyone else opposing? Yeah. That passes at this point. Now we want to go with the second motion, Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that we amend the fiscal 23 budget by $1 million to account for Juneteenth of 2023.
Okay.
Second, Easter
Then
Thomas.
the motion has been moved and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Canali abstains. That passes as well. Thank you.
Request to be recognized, please. Chair.
Okay, Chief Ford, like to recognize.
Thank you. Council, since this is in committee, I assume that you will bring this resolution to your next full council meeting for action. And once we have an action passed on that resolution, then we can take the appropriate steps to make sure that the budget is amended accordingly, both for the FY22 already adopted budget and for the FY23 proposed budget in the amount of $1 million to include a 14th holiday for Juneteenth.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
I did have that in Budget Committee.
Thank you, Chief Ford. Thank you, Councilman Jones. You have another presentation? That ends it. Presentation for the Personnel Division. We can take a break or go on to finance, and how do you Thank you. Okay, we're going to continue. Next up is the City of Memphis Finance Division, fiscal year 2023 operating budget request. Please identify yourself and your title, and you may begin after you have done such.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Council Chairperson. My name is Walter Person, 125 North Main. I am the Deputy CFO for the City of Memphis as it relates to budget and accounting at the moment. So my role is to work in that capacity here. There will also be another Deputy CFO that will be working with you all this evening discussing debt service, Deputy Chief Walker, who I believe is seated behind me. So we're going to do our best to, one, thank you for the opportunity to come before you today, and also to communicate the activities that we are involved in from a finance perspective that, to our best efforts, benefit the City of Memphis, as well as the ongoing operations of city government in the Memphis area. With that, I'll go in. Of course, our director is seated next to me here. It's Shirley Ford, the Chief Financial Officer for the City of Memphis. This discussion will focus largely on General Fund 111, but there will also be some brief discussions of other funds that are under our control. And of course, this is occurring today. If this goes forward. Nope. Here we go. All righty, this is our organizational structure. The Finance Administration team is pretty much the group that oversees all the operations for the finance area. There we have grants compliance and investment management. Those groups are located or housed under Finance Administration to maintain both autonomy and responsiveness. The grants compliance team is responsible for not only council-related grants, but our federal grants, and we want to make sure that those are managed and governed with the most independence, and therefore we house it in that area. Investment management, we need the responsiveness of having access to our cash and cash flow operations, and we necessarily needed that to report directly to the CFO's office. In financial accounting, we have several different sectors. We have governmental accounting, we have the accounts payable area, records management, and records management is the group that interfaces most directly with the City Council in terms of archiving records performance for the City Council. Operational accounting, which deals with bank reconciliations and ongoing operations to make sure that the city is operating efficiently, as well as payroll, which is near and dear to all of our hearts. We have procurement, the budget office, which I am a part of, debt management, the city treasurer's office, which is responsible for the collections of all of the property taxes that are essentially due to the City of Memphis. Financial and strategic planning, we have the equity business opportunity and development programs, and I believe we have the director of that program here today, Director Mitchell. A new director, and we're glad to have him, which houses the Office of Business Diversity and Compliance, as well as the Business Development Center and Planning and Development. Alrighty, strategic priorities of the Finance Division. The Finance Division strives to continue to advance a culture of excellence in government by providing good fiscal and financial stewardship. Funding for FY23 will provide the resources to continue our mission of providing financial leadership, superior financial services, timely financial information, and award-winning reporting for the FY22 annual report and the FY23 budget. These programs have been GFOA recognized, and they are part of our continuing effort to provide all of these elements in a timely, efficient, and accurate manner. The FY23 proposed Finance Division budget funding provides for the maintenance of staffing established in FY22 to continue efficiency in its operations to match service demands. The non-personnel costs budget provide the appropriate level of resources for the services required. We are very fastidious in our team about trying to make sure that we don't spend more than we have to, and we monitor these activities pretty much daily. The Finance Division also includes the Office of Planning and Development, and this budget contains sufficient funding to meet the Shelby County required funding. Next, we'll launch into the expenditure discussion. This slide presents the bridge from FY22 to FY23. Incorporated in the bridge is, of course, the FY22 adopted budget. As many presenters have said already, the goal is to remain flat except for required adjustments. In this case, we go from a personnel services budget of $8,265,787 in the adopted budget for FY22 with $258,000 in adjustments to a funding budget of $8,524,510. We're proposing an $8,970,530 budget for FY23. This incorporates many changes, including getting up to more acceptable staffing levels. We were hit fairly hard during the COVID pandemic by a reduction in staffing, as well as other activities that we're trying to address in this process. We're also bridging from a material and supplies budget of $2,214,645 up to $2,551,308. Again, much related to the same types of activities. Our equipment budget, we're looking at pretty much a flat activity. We were at $10,000 before. We have $5,300 in additional equipment-related activities, and that gave us a funding budget of $22 of $15,306. But we're going to come back to $10,000 for the upcoming year. Those were special one-off activities. Grants and subsidies. Grants and subsidies, we're looking at essentially staying flat, going from $3,309,300 in FY22 to $3,309,300 for FY23. On a comparative spending basis, we're doing a little bit of a deeper dive into the various legal levels that operate within the Finance Division. We're looking at an adopted budget for Finance Administration, which is, again, the leadership group. We see moving from a FY22 budget of $627,455 up to an FY23 request of $847,579. We did see some changes in the administrative group, I being one of those members, where I think we operated without a deputy CFO in this capacity for nearly a year, and that was a struggle for the department, so I'm very thankful for this opportunity, and I think that we are thankful to getting back up to complement. We've also been working with Accelerate Memphis and getting staffing around that area to also buttress our support of that very important program. Financial accounting, we're seeing a growth from $3,162,530 to our current request of $3,192,998. Essentially flat. Now, one of the things you'll see, and I'll talk to this more when we look at the authorized complement, financial accounting is remaining flat, but we have dealt with some staffing challenges in that area, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Purchasing, largely flat as well. We will go from $1,385,050 to $1,488,630, and much of the same explanations apply there. Our budget office, essentially flat. We're going from $566,322 to $571,871. Moving on down the line, you see that many of these other areas, with the exception of the Equal Business and Development programs, are actually showing more or less flat to some slight reductions. We see some changes there, and I think that's largely driven by the fact that we've had some personnel changes in that area. We've had leadership changes as well as some personnel movements, all to the better. If you look at the very last line, you'll notice that there's a rather large funding budget issue of $444,829. This amount is related to COVID-19 expenses for the Finance Division, and they were prohibitive, as they were for many other groups as well. Going to the next page, we talk about full-time salaries and a discussion of year-over-year changes in expenditures. See the full-time salaries amount of $340,141. That is including, again, the new personnel that have joined our team, as well as other modifications and equity arrangements that we've made for existing personnel in light of basically a lot of employment studies and looking at the market for our specialized accounting skills. Potential raises, which are provided in accordance with the mayor's budget, for 2% increase across the board for general employees, which the accounting division is largely general employees. Of course, health division, pension ADC, those are related to basically human resource related expenses that have communicated and that were communicated a little bit earlier this afternoon. All other personnel expenses include group life increases, unemployment increases, Medicare, and long-term disabilities that total $9,453. From a materials and supplies element, we're looking at $250,000 to fund a disparity study. This was an effort that was agreed to at the senior leadership level and implemented in the finance department to look at disparate or potential disparate activities across the city. Of course, we are hit by the same elements as others, city shop charges for 77,904. Lawsuits, this element is provided by the city attorney's office. For insurance, we saw a reduction of $39,000. This is largely due to all of these expenses being incorporated under the city attorney or the city legal division. So you'll see that throughout all of the presentations this week and into the next week. And all of the M&S expenses basically reduced by $1,008, which is a compilation of miscellaneous expenses reducing by $2,008 and claims increasing by $1,000. Launching into the revenue discussion. Clearly, as finance, we are largely an expense area, not necessarily a revenue area. But we saw basically a bridging 48,000 in the FY22 adopted budget to a proposed budget of 48,000. These other revenues consist largely of roughly $45,000 that I think is a grant fund that comes in to our ODBC area to fund activities in that area, and $3,000 out of the planning division led by John Zena's area. No changes in year-over-year revenue. Division detail. Division detail, we're planning on staying static in terms of our authorized complement. Now, there was some shifting in the authorized complement. As you look down to the business development and area and equal business opportunity, there was a shift between those two areas. So you saw a reduction of one hit count in business development and an increase in equal business opportunity of that one hit count, but overall it's static. But coming back to an issue that I raised earlier, if you look at finance and accounting from a vacancy perspective, procurement, as well as equal business opportunities in each of those areas, we've experienced fairly significant, I would say, personnel and leadership changes. And you see that reflected in our vacant positions. We are actively recruiting in all of those areas, and we really hope to have that remedied in short order. Material and supplies, miscellaneous professional services, pretty much lead off our materials and supplies impact with $1,475,000, roughly 58% of our overall M&S expenditures, advertising and publication elements, and those elements are primarily related to our treasury activities and activities of that nature, such as advertising and sending out tax notices, providing information to citizens around other legislatively required communication devices that may occur in our department. Supplies outside of $150,000, rent of $169,000. The rent is related to the Universal Life Facility, which houses our ODBC operations. And that's the bulk of that. The outside postage is an ancillary expense that is related to our advertising and publications. When we send out these notices and tax forms, we use postage to provide that service to our citizens. City shop charges, again, miscellaneous service charges, $100,000 in expense recovery, primarily related to our purchase area, and all other M&S expense of $394, and that all other M&S includes city computers. We had utility and security at the Universal Life Facility, and we have some outside printing charges for specialized treasury tax notices. Next, accounting details, professional services. We have various activities for the finance division for sourcing and implementation of ongoing projects. RHI is Robert Half, CTD is another staffing agency, and essentially those elements are focused on the fact that we have vacancies in a lot of these areas. So we are trying to keep our operations going with a fairly meaningful contingent of contract folks, and so that is driving a lot of that expense. From a disparity study standpoint, that's the 250 that we talked about earlier. We got Cirrus Labs, which is an effort in our procurement and purchasing area to bring a lot of file duplication and redundancy into check so that we can streamline our contracting process more effectively. Operation Hope is $101,000. We have to obtain a printing business tax license from the Shelby County Clerk's Office to the tune of $100,000. Moving on down the line here a little bit, we see other expenses that are fairly much smaller. I think the Tyler Technologies integration system with Payit, that is probably the other interesting expense there, and that is related to our treasury system. From an accounts detail leases standpoint, again, Self-Tucker, master tenant. This is the Universal Life Building. This is the $169,000 lease that we referenced that is housing our ODBC operations. From a minority business, women in business enterprise standpoint, I think this is a number that is pretty nice, and I want to take time to mention it. I think that Deputy Chief Walker has spent a lot of time and effort, as well as others, Chief Ford included, to ensure that we have activity in our minority women in business enterprise area. And if you look at a total certified plus non-certified MWBE spend, it's at 37.84. And so that is a pretty good performance for a division our size. We're going to move briefly into a discussion of some of the other funds that we manage in the finance department. Again, these are not general funds, but to give you a perspective on the operation of some of these funds. We probably will discuss at some length the State Street Fund, the Hotel Motel Fund, the new Memphis Arena Fund. The Sales Tax Referendum Fund, I'm going to tell you that fund is actually a pretty dynamic fund, so we probably won't dwell on that one a lot. Pre-K, there's a little bit of activity going on there that I can mention. And unemployment actually is pretty good because unemployment's at a pretty good low ebb right now. State Street, these funds are supported by a state gasoline tax, and we receive revenues in the State Street Aid Fund from the state to support road and maintenance and issues related to that. Some portion of these funds are attributed to MATA. The rest remain as an expense recovery for our ongoing activities. We're looking at a proposed budget of $110 million for that period. This is a small decline from what we had as actuals in FY21. And this element is really, again, devoted and dedicated to maintaining our roads and recovering expenses from that road maintenance activity. Hotel Motel Tax, this is a three-part tax, and this tax essentially took a hit, as you all may well know, a little bit when we looked at the impact of COVID on our hotel motel activities. But we have seen a little bit of, I would say, the green shoots of life of this coming back. So from that standpoint, we're looking at a proposed increase from the adopted budget of $10 million in FY22 to $15,750 for FY23. We're also not looking for any contributions from fund balance to address the issues related to the hotel motel tax fund. The new Memphis Arena, this is part of our efforts at debt service for the new Memphis Arena process, project which we're all very proud of right now with the performance of the Grizzlies. Again, this pretty much tracks along at a fairly even clip of $2,500,000, and we're planning on keeping that flat for FY23 as well. The pre-K fund, will be seeing a few changes. As you see, it will be moving as we look at this across boards for the proposed FY23 of $6 million. This will be funded by the sales tax referendum fund on a go-forward basis. The current funding methodologies will be used to support other activities within the city. And the unemployment fund is tracking a little bit lower, and the reason for that is the fairly low levels of unemployment-related expenses that we've seen in the city. That's it for me. I don't know if anybody has any questions before I pass it on to Deputy Chief Walker.
We have one council member in the queue. Councilman Jones, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. My question is related to the hotel motel tax fund. For the adopted year 2022, I see a $10 million figure. However, the forecast for this year is $15 million, so a 50% increase there. Did we not use some ARPA or CARES Act funds to fund this hotel motel special revenue fund?
Chief Ford would like to be recognized. Chief Ford.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Councilman Jones, for that question. We did, in fact, earmark some of the ARPA funds for revenue replacement for the hotel motel tax. We are kind of waiting to see how well it's stabilized, to see whether we would actually need to do that or not. What we have currently looked at, again, in our adopted budget, we were anticipating revenues of approximately $10 million. What we are starting to see in these last couple of months is a little bit of resurgence in the hotel rooms. As of the end of April, we are at $13.5 million. So we're going ahead and forecasting out that we could possibly hit that $15 million number. So it's actually significantly up, several million dollars already over our FY21, as you can see at 11.3. So we're kind of in a little bit of hold pattern, but yes, sir, you are absolutely correct. And you remember absolutely correct that we were earmarking some of the ARPA funds to offset the shortage in the hotel motel tax.
And how much, do you recall how much we allocated or earmarked?
Well, I think it was $4 million, sir.
Okay. So, this is a bigger question though. And, I had some hesitancy about approving it going to this particular fund. At the time, I felt that a bigger need could have perhaps been the cost overruns. So I hope that this is something, if we're talking about what would be in this 15 million number does not include that 4 million that's earmarked, does it?
It does not, sir.
Okay. So what I'm saying here is that we're talking about a 50% increase versus what was projected, but we still earmarked $4 million for it. I think that we may need to go, and I felt that we should have allocated more towards the cost overruns on projects. I think that we may want to go back and revisit that because we are talking about using $10 million of general fund for these cost overruns. We could perhaps use that $4 million that's earmarked to this because if we come into 15, we're 50% above where we started. I see that as a way for us to reduce how much we're taking from the general fund in order to fund some of those things.
Chief Ford.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. And as we kind of talked about in the budget overview, was that only yesterday? It was. As we look at the ARPA funds, we do want, we were kind of, if you remember, we allocated ARPA funds a year ago looking at this, and we fully anticipated that the hotel motel tax would dramatically drop off, as well as the TDZ revenue, which it has. And just to point out, I think we were looking at a significant drop in TDZ revenue, and to date, we've only moved about $5 million out of that for current projects in TDZ. However, on the hotel motel, as we were planning this a year ago, we were surprised to find, and that's why I think this council has been very wise to kind of allocate the money and then see how well it is performing against what we anticipated. And certainly, I would absolutely agree that if we ended up not needing additional money in the hotel motel tax, that we could move that to any other use that this council deemed appropriate. And certainly one of the cost overruns is one of those areas that we are watching very closely, that we do feel like as we continue to recover from the pandemic, that, we're not sure these costs are going to go down. They are probably most likely going to go up. And I think that is an excellent point.
Okay. What I don't see on here, and I would say that fiscal year 2020 would probably be a fuller picture. Do we know what that amount is? Because if we're looking at 15 million, unless fiscal year 2020 was like at, and we don't have it here. It'll be a stab in the dark for me to even think of what it is. We still may come in significantly higher than what we've ever been, even at that. I know that 2020 fiscal year 2021 may be a false number, if you would, a false reading based upon COVID. I just don't know what fiscal year 2020 is, but that's a conversation that I think we should have, and I would want us to have that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Councilman Jones. And I do not have the 20 numbers with me, but I do seem to recall around that 18, 19, 20 period, we were hitting about $18 million in hotel motel tax.
Okay, that part I didn't know. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's it.
You're welcome. Councilman Canale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chief Ford, why do you project the state street aid? I know it's not much, $479,000, but why do you project it to be less this year?
What page are you on? What page are you on?
22.
Where'd you get 4,000?
I was just curious. I thought that that category, no, but from 21,
Okay.
I thought it would be going up.
Sorry, thank you, sir. On the 21 actual. So we can only report what was actually in there, and where we forecast right now is based on what we're seeing. Do you remember a couple things, I think, is that people may have been home and driving less, so you would think the revenue would be less, obviously, but also gas prices are going up, so people are driving less.
Okay. And do you have the numbers on what we have generated on the sales tax referendum through April?
I do. Hang on. In the sales tax referendum through the month of April, we have collected $58,512,158 in revenue.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I have a basic question. You said your 2% increase for employees, that's on page 8. How did you derive 243, 400? I don't know why that's standing out for me. You got it.
Thank you. So the 2% increase is based on head count. It is simply the salaries that were current times 2%.
Is that the same that's on page 5? Projected budget, or what are you using? Where's your budget for your personnel? Or you don't have that here, man, I'm not understanding.
When you say page 5, I'm sorry,
On page
Chairperson, what?
5, personnel services, where's your personnel, what is the personnel budget for? Y'all keep that separate, is that?
For FY '23?
Uh-huh.
So if you look on slide 5,
Right.
the first line, personnel,
That'd be it, right?
that's our total personnel services. That's everything. That's salaries. That's everything in the whole category.
So, I'm still can't understand, what's 2% of that? If you gave yourself,
Oh no, ma'am. The 8.2 million is all of our personnel expenses. That includes bonus days. That includes healthcare cost, insurance cost.
Overtime,
That's a
just
whole
all the expenses
category.
that fall into the personnel budget. So the
I'm
2%,
still trying to see where 243 came from there. In case I said, let me figure out how y'all working with 2% on page 8.
the 2% amount, this is Walter Person again, the 2% amount is supposed to be based on the 112-person head count and the salaries that are based in the finance division budget, just salaries, full-time salaries.
Okay, so do I have a number for that? Here, I don't have that number here.
It's not broken out in this document completely. This is just showing, the slide on page 8 is showing year-over-year change, but the base full-time salary amount is not disclosed in this presentation.
I'm still trying to figure out how y'all got 243.
We haven't broken that out for any division that's been presented.
I just started looking at it thinking, okay.
I gotcha. It is
9 million, and then if I get 2% of 9 million, that's not 243. I'm just saying.
You're right.
It's over what you would be needing. So do we need to go back and check all the 2% credit y'all want for that? Am I thinking right?
I mean, that it's a system calculated. This comes out of a system. We don't manually just calculate.
Check the system, you know.
Well, what we do, the way we check.
I'm not saying I have been through that and found out there was a flaw in the system, and one number can mess you up.
I completely understand, and thank you, ma'am. One of the ways that we check that is HR gives us an expected number saying, here's the number that we expect a 3% raise across the entire general fund division would be. And then we confirm that after every division rolls their numbers up, that the general fund number is that number.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. But thank you for the question. Yes, ma'am.
But I still can't see 243, even at 9 million. So that's my question mark. So it should be a lot less. Okay, no problem, but check that for me, please. Anyone else has any other questions?
Well, Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and ask this question now because we're going to be going through the debt service part of it, and not really related to that. This is, Chief Ford, this goes back to CIP. And for this year, there's an ask of $2 million for Treasury tax system. I went back into some old books that I had, and it looks like in 2019, our adopted CIP had $2.5 million for Treasury tax system. And then in 2020, we had an additional $2.25 million for Treasury tax system. So that comes out to a total of about $4.75 million. But when I asked how much had we spent with the previous system, I was told about $1 million. So can you reconcile for me, because this is just 3 years ago, a particular tax system that we spent nearly $5 million for, but we're having to spend another $2 million this year?
I'll be glad, thank you, Councilman Jones. I'll be glad to go back and look at that with you. I know that we have had one instance that I think was around 2019 where Thomson Reuters was the vendor that we had paid certain amounts to produce the property tax system that would be compatible both with the city of Memphis and the trustee's office. That project was abandoned because they were unable to complete the project. The next project that we endeavored to undertake was with Tyler Technologies, and that is the second one that you see, and that is the one that is under discussion with legal. And if we're going to have any other discussions on that, we should probably do it under attorney-client privilege.
Okay, and then so this, what was being presented the other day is a third tax system then?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so my final comment, it would be helpful for, if we can get an idea of what we spent of that 2.5 for, how much we spent of that 2.5 in 2019, and then if it's Tyler, how much we spent of that 225. Just, I would like a clearer picture of what we spent since 2019 to, or for a treasury tax system.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else in the queue, I need a motion to move. Can I get a second on the operating general fund budget request for 2023? Can I get a second?
Second. Ford.
Second by Ford. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All in opposed, signify by saying nay. Having none, that passes and approved. Thank you. You may proceed to the second section.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming and doing us. Okay, introduce yourself and your title and who's with you. And after you do that, you may begin. Thank you again.
There we go. Andre Walker, Deputy Chief Financial Officer. I have with me Ms. Carol Ward, who's the city's debt coordinator. And, all right, there we go. All right, and we'll be presenting the operating budget for the debt service fund. The debt service fund is used primarily to ensure timely payments of principal and interest on most of the city's debt. It does not include debt issued for the sanitary sewer system or the stormwater system. The two primary sources of revenue for the debt service fund include property tax revenues as well as sales tax revenues. The debt service fund is allocated a little over 31% of the city's property tax rate, and it receives 7% of the local option sales tax revenue, excluding the portion related to the sales tax referendum. Other revenue sources in the debt service fund include special revenue pledged to pay special revenue debt, or specific revenue pledged to pay special revenue debt, federal subsidy payments, and transfers from other funds. there are three types of debt administered in the debt service fund. We got general obligation debt, appropriation obligation debt, and special revenue debt. General obligation debt is secured by the city's full faith and credit and taxing authority. It includes GO bonds, commercial paper, as well as bonds issued by the New Memphis Arena Public Building Authority, which provided funding for Accelerate Memphis. Appropriation obligation debt is secured by the city's pledge to annually appropriate funds to pay the principal and interest on the debt, and this includes capital leases, qualified energy conservation bonds, and bonds issued by the Port Commission on behalf of the city as well as the county to provide funding for the Electrolux project, and also bonds issued by EDGE to provide funding for Accelerate Memphis. And then finally, we have special revenue debt, which is secured by thank you, man. Which is secured by specific pledged revenues. It is usually issued through a conduit issuer on behalf of the city to provide funding for economic development projects. And it includes TDZ revenue bonds as well as baseball stadium bonds. So looking at the city's general obligation debt, as of June 30th of this year, we'll have a little over $1.4 billion in GO bonds outstanding. We currently have $75 million in commercial paper outstanding. So together we have $1.5 billion in GO debt. The FY 2023 budget for the debt service fund includes $146.1 million in debt service payments on the city's existing $1.4 billion in GO bonds. It also includes $2.7 million in interest payments on the city's commercial paper. As Chief Ford mentioned yesterday, currently we're paying about 1.3% on our outstanding commercial paper. About a month or two ago, it was only 70 basis points, so it almost doubled. However, when we look at the budget, we assume that we'll be paying up to 3% on commercial paper. So we built in some extra cushion or budget capacity there. The budget also includes $2.6 million in interest on future GO bonds. So every 18 months or so, the city issues GO bonds to retire commercial paper that's outstanding. We're assuming that mid-fiscal year next year, towards the end of this calendar year, we'll come back before this body to seek authorization to issue GO bonds to retire $150 million in commercial paper. So we've included about $2.6 million in interest that represents a half a year interest on the proposed bonds. Next slide, we have appropriation obligation debt. So there are four types of appropriation obligation debt. We got the Port Commission bonds, again, issued on behalf of the city and the county. Both the city and the county pay the debt service on the bonds on a 50-50 basis. So the city's share of the outstanding debt is $14.2 million. FY 23 debt service for the city, $1.4 million. By the way, we've identified a refunding opportunity for these bonds, and we're working with the county, the Port Commission, as well as EDGE, and we hope to present that opportunity to this body sometime in June. We have about $5 million in solid waste leases outstanding. FY 23 debt service on those is about $2.6 million. Got $3 million in qualified energy conservation bonds outstanding. FY 23 debt service on those is $1.2 million. And we have the bonds issued by EDGE to provide funding, $25 million in funding for Accelerate Memphis. Debt service on those in FY 23 is $900,000. Special revenue bonds. So we have three types of special revenue bonds. We got the downtown TDZ revenue bonds, revenue refunding bonds. There's $113.5 million outstanding. And those bonds are secured by TDZ revenue generated within the downtown TDZ. In the event those revenues are insufficient, the city could use non-Avalon revenue security deficiency. FY 23 debt service on those bonds is $15.6 million. We have the newly issued Liberty Park TDZ revenue bonds. We issued $69.6 million in bonds this past July, and those bonds are secured by future TDZ revenue generated in the Liberty Park TDZ. We don't anticipate receiving TDZ revenue from the Liberty Park TDZ until FY 2024. So as allowable in state statute, the city have set aside bond proceeds to pay the interest on those bonds through including FY 2024. And then we use TDZ revenue to pay the debt service thereafter. Debt service in FY 23 on those bonds, $1.8 million. Finally, we have the AutoZone Park Baseball Stadium bonds, $13.8 million outstanding, and they're secured primarily by baseball-related sales tax rebates generated within the park. Debt service on those bonds is $2.2 million for FY 23. And this is a summary of all debt service payments. GO debt service, $151.5 million. Appropriation obligation debt service, $6.1 million. Special revenue debt service, $19.5 million for a total of $177.1 million. And to the right at the top, you'll see the breakdown of that $177 million, $106.7 million is principal, and $70.4 million is interest. Revenues. We're going to focus on the column to the far right, the requested budget for FY 2023, starting at the top. We're projecting $126 million in property tax revenues. We drop down about 4 or 5 lines below that. We'll see $11 million projection for local ops and sales tax revenues. And then if we go to the very bottom, I want to point out an error that we made. You'll see the $150.8 million. It is on the line proceeds from refunding debt. In the operation budget that was submitted to council initially, that money was on the line below it under bond sales proceeds. The difference between the two is the bond sales proceeds is for new money bonds. The proceeds from refunding debt is when we pay off existing debt, such as the commercial paper. So when council considers this budget, I ask that you consider it as amended with the $150.8 million on the proceeds from refunding debt. And by the way, the $158.8 million is the proceeds from the proposed GO bonds that we anticipate issuing later this year to take out commercial paper. Going to the expenditures, again, focusing on a column to the far right, we'll go down to the 4th line from the top, the $780,000 bond issuance cost that is related to the proposed future GO bonds that will be issued to take out commercial paper. Line below that, $106.7 million. That is the principal that we've seen on the previous slide. And then below that, the $70.4 million is the interest that was presented on the previous slide. And at the far bottom, you'll see the $150 million being used to retire commercial paper. And that concludes my presentation.
Councilman Jones, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. Great report, Mr. Walker. I have a question about things. I'm looking at the last 2 pages that you presented. So if we take the revenues of 322 and then the expenditures of 329, how do we count for the $7 million difference?
So at the end of FY 2021, the debt service fund had $48.1 million in committed fund balance, and we're going to use some of those fund balance this fiscal year, and we anticipate using other portion of that fund balance next fiscal year as well. Over the next 5 years or so, let's see, this is 2022 through 2026, we expect to draw that fund balance down over the next few years until we get through 2026.
Okay, and so through 2026, if we continue on the same schedule, what will that take that fund balance down to?
It will,
approximately.
When I looked at it last, it will remain positive, but I think it was, I want to say it was under $10 million, more like $5 million or so. But still
okay,
positive.
So, okay, but is it not prudent for us to have a certain percentage in that when we talk about the total amount of debt that we have?
I think the city's policy is to have in the debt service fund a fund balance equal to roughly 1/12 of the annual debt service on GO bonds.
Okay, and so what is that figure offhand? I don't know that figure offhand.
Let's see. So FY 2023 debt service on GO bonds. Let's say we got 151 million. So 1/12 of that, about $11 million or so. About 12.
Okay.
$12 million.
Okay, but we're sitting at about 40 some odd right now, though, correct?
Correct. As of June 30th, $48.1 million.
Okay.
And that's for committed balance. We do have another balance that's restricted, but we don't consider that.
Okay. What are some circumstances that could cause a greater burn rate through those reserves? Is there anything?
Well, as I mentioned before regarding TDZ revenues, if TDZ revenues continue to fall below the debt service of those bonds, debt service is $15.6 million. Last year, TDZ revenues totaled $4.4 million. However, we had about $12 million in surplus TDZ revenues, and those surplus were used to cure the deficiency in the TDZ revenues that we received this fiscal year. Next fiscal year, we're projecting, we really don't know. It's kind of hard to project TDZ revenues, to be honest with you. But we think it's going to increase above the $4.4 million that we got this year. So we got in the budget $7 million. It could be higher. In the event that it doesn't, and currently we have about $900,000 in surplus TDZ revenue remaining after using some of it for debt service this fiscal year. So in the event that TDZ revenue does not rebound, that could cause a further drain on the debt service fund balance.
Okay, and then that TDZ revenue shortfall, we could say that pretty much is COVID driven, correct?
That is correct. Definitely
okay.
COVID.
Because I'm looking at, now going back to the revenue section again, we're not anticipating anything from the tourism development zone local sales tax.
So this year, we didn't receive a penny on the local portion. Pre-COVID, TDZ revenues was about $20.5 million in 2019. It dropped down to about $16.1 million. This year, it dropped down to 4.4 with no local TDZ revenue. Actually, when the state provided their calculation, if it could, it would have been negative $3 million in local TDZ revenues.
Okay, and then I'm also looking at this. Can you explain the federal grants for this next fiscal year? Is that what we allocated out of ARPA?
So $7 million of that 8.9, call it $9 million, is related to ARPA. The other 1.9 or $2 million is federal subsidy payments that we get on Bill American bonds.
Okay, so that answers my question. Thank you again. Thank you, Madam Chair. Jones, second.
Everyone that's want to approve and support this, please say aye.
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 Anyone in opposition say nay. Not hearing any opposition, this passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and the detail. Thank everybody for your participation. Thank you for zooming in, or virtual coming in. And thank the general public if they're listening. We'll be back at it next week, starting on Tuesday. Tuesday. All right. Have a great
Great job,
weekend.
Madam Chair.
I'll be here Monday for impasse, in case you're wondering.
I'll be here Monday too.
Have a good evening, everybody.